Good afternoon, everyone. I am Christine Ortiz-Gamina with the National Environmental Health Association. Thank you for joining us today for the EPA EnviroAtlas Tool Informs Decisions, Research, and Education webinar. A little background on this webinar series. NEHA and the EPA have partnered for the last year and a half to collaborate and promote each other's work, along with producing quarterly webinar series. Today's webinar will be on EnviroAtlas, which is a data-rich, web-based decision support tool that combines maps, analysis tools, downloadable data, and informational resources. It is used by states, tribes, communities, and individuals to help inform policy and planning decisions that impact the places we live, learn, work, and play. EnviroAtlas data are available for the entire U.S. via an online interactive map. A bit of housekeeping first. All webinar participants will be in listen-only mode. This webinar is being recorded and will be provided on the NEHA Data and Informatics page. Additionally, EPA will share through their modes of media as well. There will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation. Q&A will be conducted via the webinar chat box. Feel free to enter in any questions you have via the chat box throughout the webinar, and we'll address the questions at the end of the presentation. I will now pass it to Bailey Stearns at EPA Office of Science Communication and Outreach, who will introduce our speakers.
Hi everyone, this is Bailey. Our speakers today are Ann Neal and Jessica Daniel. Ann Neal leads our EnviroAtlas project in our Office of Research and Development here in Durham, North Carolina. Ann has a background in landscape ecology and ecosystem services and has been with EPA since 1991. One of her primary research interests has been examining relationships between spatial patterns of landscape characteristics and ecological resources, ecosystem services, and human health outcomes. One of her goals with EnviroAtlas is to translate science into tools and data that can be readily understood and used by a broad audience. Jessica is an environmental protection specialist in EPA's Office of Research and Development, also here in North Carolina, where she facilitates communication and outreach efforts for the EnviroAtlas project. She is invested in translating scientific information and utilizing web tools and technology to inform decision-making, research, and education. And I will now pass it over to Jessica Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us for this webinar. EnviroAtlas has been online since about 2014, so some of you might have some familiarity with EnviroAtlas. We add to and update the tools and resources that we have periodically. So some of what Annie and I are going to cover today is going to be sort of newer updates to EnviroAtlas and showing you kind of what we have that you may not have seen before. One thing I will go ahead and say is that EPA is currently having some network issues. We are very much hoping to do a live demo of the mapping application for you all, but we're going to have to play it by ear. So when we get there, we're going to show you some of our online resources. And if we can't show you a demo, we're going to show you exactly how to go access that application and follow along with us. So thanks for joining us today. So EnviroAtlas, it is a public website, and as Bailey mentioned, we do provide interactive tools so that people can use those tools. And so we have some examples that we'll share with you today about how people are using EnviroAtlas, but we created it with some sort of ideas in mind for what we thought when we were providing this resource. So one of those is to increase the ability for technology transfer through the tools that we provide. Everything that we develop is openly available, and we want people to be able to use these tools easily. We also want to provide data that's across multiple scales and topic areas so that people can use these data sets for their own personal uses. EnviroAtlas provides streamlined access to a wealth of data. We'll get into some of that data today, and we're hoping that you all will sort of jog your own ideas of how you might be able to use this data and ask us any questions that you have in the Q&A portion. So please do feel free to sort of document your questions as you have them, and we'll be happy to answer those as we go through. One of the other important factors about EnviroAtlas is that we wanted to offer our data through a consistent format and provide all of the documentation for that data via very well vetted metadata, and we do provide fact sheets for every single data layer. So we'll show you some of those as well. So Bailey mentioned she mentioned this topic when she was introducing Annie. With EnviroAtlas, we started forming this tool and these resources around this concept of ecosystem services. And really broadly, ecosystem services are loosely defined as the benefits that we as humans receive from nature. So we might not think about the fact that, trees and, grasses or, waterways are providing these benefits. But with EnviroAtlas, we've organized our data around these benefit categories that you see here. So things like clean air, clean and plentiful water, hazard mitigation. And we'll show you how these ecosystem services benefit categories kind of loop in with the data as we go through. And really the main idea here is to think about if you're making a decision and you're really focused on, air quality improvement and you want to make a change, what we're trying to demonstrate with our data is how making one change that you're thinking about for one topic area like clean air might actually provide additional benefits in other areas like biodiversity conservation or clean and plentiful water. So EnviroAtlas is pretty multifaceted. We provide a lot of tools and information. The two images that you see here are flagship tools, the Interactive Mapping application and the EcoHealth Relationship Browser. I do think we'll be able to show you the EcoHealth Relationship Browser today, and we'll try to see how the map is working for us, working through our network issues. We do provide access to over 400 geospatial data sets. The important thing to remember here is that you don't need GIS skills to access our data. All of these data sets are available online via this mapping application that you see here. So even if you don't have GIS skills, you can get in there and access those data. In addition to data sets, we provide analytic and interpretive tools that are accessible via our mapping application. If you are a GIS professional, we also do provide GIS toolboxes that you can access and use. Newer to EnviroAtlas, we provide online video tutorials. So if we don't get a chance to demo for you today, don't worry. We have a video tutorials page that shows you how to do everything in the mapping application, and we'll point you to where those video tutorials are. If you're interested in educational lesson plans, we do provide lesson plans for educators, and we also provide guides for using EnviroAtlas in certain situations, like in health impact assessments. So to start with our educational curriculum, for those that are interested in kind of ready-made lesson plans that you can use right now, we do provide 4 lesson modules that include hands-on and outdoor portions, as well as interactive portions that are online using our tools. And you can see the topics for those lesson plans here. We do provide lesson plans for kindergarten through undergraduate levels, and you can access any of those online. They do align with next generation science standards and individual state science standards, which are available in the appendix of each lesson plan. So a lot of resources there if you're looking to sort of use tools and resources around environmental topics for education. So I mentioned one of our flagship tools, the EcoHealth Relationship Browser. Here's a screenshot of that tool, and I'm going to play a little video here to show you how that operates. So what the EcoHealth Relationship Browser does is it takes a very extensive literature review. There are over 700 scientific articles that are summarized in this tool, and it distills them down into quick blurbs that you can see here. So you see the evidence for heat hazard mitigation and hospital admissions. And what it does is it links the scientific evidence from 5 main ecosystems to 6 ecosystem services that those major ecosystems provide, and then individual health outcomes that are linked to those services. So you can see how engaging with nature might provide certain benefits like mental health or happiness or decreases in depression, things like that. So this tool gives you a really easy front end to sort of work with and navigate to explore very extensive literature. And we'll get into that and show you that as well. So if there's a topic that you're interested in, or if you're following along on your own machine, we'll be happy to demonstrate specific pieces.
Great, great. Okay, so we just switched over, and this is Annie speaking now. And I just wanted to mention that the researchers, both within EPA and also external to EPA, are using a lot of the data that we create for EnviroAtlas, and they're using those data sets to conduct their own EcoHealth relationship research. So, for example, one of our colleagues is looking at the relationship between BMI or obesity and presence of green space around people's homes. And so after those studies get published, then those also get added to this EcoHealth relationship browser that Jessica introduced. So this next slide is showing the EnviroAtlas Interactive Map that Jessica mentioned, and this provides a really easy way for users to access and discover EnviroAtlas data. This is one of 3 ways. We also publish all of the data as web services, so you can just use the data, you can stream it into your own GIS system very readily, and we also provide the ability to download all of the data. So the data are organized into the tabs that you can see across the top here, on the top left, and you can click on biodiversity and ecosystem services, demographics, time series data. You can also add your own data from here, and hopefully we'll be able to show you all of this in the live demo. And then the data are all organized into the data topics that you can see down the left side. That is what we refer to as the table of contents. Users can also add their own data to the map for a session. So if you've got a data layer and you want to look at it in the context of all of the other EnviroAtlas data, it's really easy to add that. And likewise, you can search for data from the internet and add it to the map, and you can save your session and return to it later on. The box that's highlighted in red around the top is where you'll find the built-in analysis tools, and we'll talk about those a bit more in a moment. Okay. Is it just okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's even affecting our ability, the network issues are even affecting our ability to switch slides a little bit. And so this slide is showing just an example of a few of the over 400 data layers that are in the Atlas. And basically we have data that are available for the entire nation, with less data layers available right now for Alaska and Hawaii, but we're working on that. And so a lot of these layers are based on 30-meter land cover data, which means we know what the land cover data is, whether it's forest or impervious, grassland, for every 30 square meters on the ground. And then we add a lot of other ancillary data layers, and we derive unique data products from that. And so what we end up producing is data that are consistent for the conterminous US. And so the examples that are just shown here are carbon sequestration for the national data, population density, and so we take the census data from the Census Bureau, and we take that and drive that down to a 30-meter pixel also, so we know how many people are actually residing within each 30-meter pixel on the ground. And then we've developed a floodplain map for the US that incorporates the FEMA data, but it also provides an estimation of whether or not an area is in a 100-year floodplain for areas that are not covered by the FEMA data. And then the last national example there is looking at the number of climate vulnerable bird species across the US. And these data are summarized by a medium-sized watershed. So there's about 85,000 units for the US, and those are called 12-digit HUCs. And then we also have high-resolution data for a number of populated places across the U.S. And here we start with a 1 meter land cover data. So we have a data point for every square meter of ground. And for these areas, we've created over 100 unique data layers, and it covers about 15% of the U.S. population, so about 65 million people and over 1,450 cities and towns. And the examples given in the pictures are the 1 meter land cover, where red is impervious, dark green is tree cover. We also have intersection density, which is related to an area's walkability. On the lower right, we have impervious surfaces, and then also proximity to park entrances across this community area. So let's see, we'll go on. Oh, and and also for every data layer, as Jessica mentioned, we have the metadata, and then we have a fact sheet, which hopefully we'll be able to show you a few of those. And this map shows the areas across the U.S. where we have this very high resolution data, and then a couple of areas, San Diego and Seattle, Tacoma, where the data are currently under development. We mentioned that EnviroAtlas has some built-in tools within the interactive map, and there's a watershed navigator that lets you link an area with the area of the watershed upstream or downstream. So if, for example, you had a water quality issue in a particular watershed, not only could you look in that watershed for the current conditions, but you could also look at the area upstream and see what's going on there. There's a change analysis and time series viewer suite of tools where you can either look at an animated view of over 150 years of modeled climate data going back to the 1950s and forward to 2099. And you can look at precipitation, temperature, potential evapotranspiration. You can look at that either seasonally or annually, and you can also calculate the delta between two different time periods. The Compare My Area tool is a new tool that we've just released recently, and that lets the user compare their watershed or their census tract to the surrounding county or state values to get an idea of where their watershed or census tract ranks. And they can view those data through the lens of demographic information, national air toxics data, or landscape characteristics. And then the last one is where the user can follow a raindrop. So you can drop a point anywhere on the interactive map and find the flow path to the nearest water body. And then a couple of tools that we're working on that are coming soon that we're actually really excited about. One is a gridded analysis tool where the user can select a watershed, a county, a congressional district, or they can just drop a point on the map and define a buffer area around that point, or they can draw a custom area and they can calculate the land cover proportions for those areas selected. And this is really just the first step in this tool. This tool will be expanded and it will include information like floodplains data, potentially restorable wetlands, demographic information, people. So that's something that we're pretty excited about. And then also we're developing this screening and prioritization index tool where the user can combine multiple metrics to create like an index score for screening or prioritization for targeted questions. The first example of that will be related to the provision of clean water, and the user will be able to adjust the importance of each element that goes into that index score. And so right now that incorporates components of human land use, natural land use, riparian area protection, nutrient cycling, sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus inputs, as well as other chemical inputs. And then now we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about how states, communities, and others are using EnviroAtlas. We're going to talk about, we're going to include a kind of a mixture of examples, some that we've been very involved in, and others that we just found out about in kind of an ad hoc way. And so if you end up using EnviroAtlas, we'd be very, very interested in getting your feedback and learning how you're using EnviroAtlas as well.
Yeah, and I would just say that it's a question that we get a lot, how people are using our data and tools and resources. And it's really beneficial for us that we provide all of this information available online so that people can take it and use it. But as Andy mentioned, we may not always know that people are doing that. So we're always very happy to come across examples, and some of the ones that we've come across you'll see here. But we're always happy to hear from folks as well and help communities sort of understand how they can use these data sets.
Yes, exactly. Do you want to cover this one?
Yeah. So one example of an application for our data was we worked with EPA's Region 4, because we were in the Office of Research and Development. We worked with EPA's Region 4 as they were creating an inland port community resilience roadmap for the Memphis, Tennessee community. And so one of the things they wanted us to look at was kind of, various applications for data layers that we had that might apply to thinking about inland port communities. And so one of those examples you see here, sort of assessing flood risk and thinking about how you might mitigate the impact of flooding. So understanding where populations may be within the 100-year floodplain, and that's that top map that you see there. Identifying particularly, vulnerable populations in high-risk areas, and then thinking about where people might gather. So in the case of this place of worship data set that you see here on the bottom left, that's not a data set of ours, but we were able to pull that into our mapping application and show it with what is currently the FEMA flood zone information. And then that bottom right-hand map is a map, there are two maps that we do provide in EnviroAtlas. One is wetland restoration potential, and one is impaired waterways. So thinking about areas where if you did have impaired waters, where might you be able to restore wetlands back to their original condition to not only help with water quality, but also to help with mitigating flooding extent and duration. So another example, so this is an example of one that we came across in terms of just sort of finding out how people were using EnviroAtlas data. And here, the state of Wisconsin has used some of our data sets for different analyses. So we have talked with the Wisconsin State Urban Forester, who was looking at using EnviroAtlas data to explore greenness and health for their forest action plan. And was also looking at analyzing their per-mile canopy cover within the Milwaukee metro. If you remember from the map that Annie showed a couple of slides ago, Milwaukee is one of the communities where we have that very high-resolution information. In Milwaukee, they were also interested in looking at tree cover connectivity within that community to pinpoint areas where they might be able to find areas of greatest conservation need and preserve those areas. In 2016, they also released a plan for assessing and improving their access to outdoor recreation, which incorporated EnviroAtlas data. And they cited EnviroAtlas as a tool that can be used for identifying, establishing, and measuring the quality of life benchmarks that they were looking at in areas adjacent to improved recreation areas. Another example from Milwaukee is looking from their sewerage district. They used some EnviroAtlas data as a part of a plan for enhancing their urban biodiversity in certain districts. And if you're wondering about links to these examples, we do have them on our webpage, and I'll show you where you can access some of these examples when we go through the webpage demo. And so basically what they were doing is they were looking at existing green infrastructure projects and studying them to determine where they could use EnviroAtlas land cover to test for project trends across their green infrastructure projects.
And this one is one that we're actually working on with EPA's Office of Transportation Air Quality. And so we're using our high resolution, what we call asymmetric population map, which is again where we know how many people are, or we can estimate how many people are living within each 30-meter pixel. And we're interested in understanding where people are potentially exposed to impacts from railways, rail yards, ports, busy roadways, and airports. So in this example, we have created multiple buffer sizes around the U.S. freight network. So where you're likely to see heavy traffic, and estimating the number of people that is living within each of those different buffer sizes for every census tract and every county in the U.S. So this is work that is currently ongoing and will be potentially used in future rulemaking. And this is the point where we're going to try and do the demonstration. We know that we can show you things on the website, and we're hoping that we can show you the interactive map. Maybe it's been fixed while we've been talking.
Yes. All right. So everybody collectively cross your fingers, and we'll hope we can load the mapping application. So let me just bring up our website, and we'll walk through that. And I will say, even if we aren't able to load the map, which I'm just going to hope we are, you guys, you should not be having the same network issues we're having. So you're welcome to sort of follow along with anything I'm showing you right now and hop on the mapping application and look around and see if you have any questions for us. So hopefully we can do that all together, but if not, hopefully you can tool around on your own. So this is our home page. So you're looking at the EnviroAtlas home page. Our web address is really simple. It's just epa.gov/EnviroAtlas, and it'll bring you to this page here. As I mentioned, we did sort of start EnviroAtlas around the concept of ecosystem services. So we do make sort of background information on ecosystem services available, and you can explore that. The interactive tools that we mentioned are here, and we're going to hopefully show you both of those. The training materials you can access from our How to Use section. That includes those example projects, and I'll go there in just a second and show you some of those, as well as overview and background information for our data, and then access to our resources and publications, including all of those fact sheets for every data layer and those educational materials that I mentioned. So let's start with those example projects, because I want to make sure that you know where to go to access those. So from the EnviroAtlas team, we've developed examples either with communities or just based on feedback that we've heard from users about different scenarios where they can use our data. So you can go to this use cases page to access those. And then if you're interested in any of those examples that we mentioned that we sort of came upon or learned about, those are accessible here. So you're welcome to access those examples from communities that have used EnviroAtlas data from this second tab here. So just so you know about those. Another thing that you might be interested in looking at, actually I'll skip that for now because we might want to go back to it. Okay, so I wanted to mention really quick those ecosystem services web pages. If you're not familiar with the concept, or even if you are, you can kind of get in here and explore what we mean when we talk about our clean air and clean and plentiful water categories and how that information feeds into the data that we provide. So speaking of ecosystem services, I'm going to start with our EcoHealth Browser tools. So in this structure, it's underneath web apps, and you go to EcoHealth Browser here. This gives you some background information on the EcoHealth Browser. You can watch a demo video or read our fact sheet, but we're going to go ahead and just access that browser tool here, and we're all going to cross our fingers and hope that it's loading. We'll see. Come on. All right, so we'll give it another second and see if we can't get that to pop up. And again, you guys should not be having these issues on your side. The EPA network's just a little fussy today, so we've been struggling with the network on our internal side, but you shouldn't have this problem on your side. I'm going to give it another second to load and see if we can't get that to pop up so we can play around with it. I did open one earlier. I wonder. No, it's closed. Okay. All right, I'm going to let that load back here. I'm going to go back to our web pages, show you a few more things, and then we'll get back to that and see if we can get the EcoHealth Browser to work. I mentioned that we have a lot of background info. If we don't get a chance to show you the demo of the map, which it looks like we might not, here's the tutorial section. So we have a story map that you can access that has different tabs on different functions in the map. So depending on what you want to do, if you want to learn how to add data, if you want to learn how to add your own data, if you want to use our analysis tools, there is a video for every single thing in the mapping application. So don't feel like you won't know where to start. You can definitely use these tutorials to kind of get in there and understand all the functions that we have in the mapping application. The next place I'm gonna go is about our data. So we mentioned we have several hundred data sets, and depending on your area of interest, you might want to kind of search and sort through those and figure out, okay, do you have data that I'm interested in? Is there data available around this topic or different things? You can go to this dynamic data matrix that you see here underneath data. I already loaded that, so I'm going to go over here and see, and so we can just pop over there. So you can see I'm right here underneath dynamic data matrix. And here's our data matrix, and you can see that we have 487 data layers. Please don't be overwhelmed. But one good thing about that is there's something here for everyone. We're very confident about that. So depending on the topics of interest that you're interested in, you can kind of search and sort the data here in this data matrix. So let me give you a rundown of exactly what you're seeing in the data matrix. The first thing you're seeing is the data layer name. That's pretty easy. And these are in alphabetical order. So you can use these headers to sort based on what you're interested in, and I'll show you that. This second column is the benefit categories that we talked about. So those ecosystem services benefit categories. So if you know, hey, I'm really interested in hazard mitigation, what data do you have related to hazard mitigation? Just go right here, click hazard mitigation, and anything that has the hazard mitigation icon that you see right here, this red icon lit up, is going to move to the top. So any of the data layers that we have related to hazard mitigation are going to move to the top. And you can see here that different icons are highlighted. That means that this data layer is related to clean and plentiful water and hazard mitigation. So you can use these icons as a way to sort of think about those ecosystem services benefit categories. And it also gives you an idea of kind of those different ranges of benefits that you might get, right, if you're thinking about this particular data layer. In our mapping application, as Annie mentioned in the slides, our data are organized by these topics. So when you're in the map, you would go to the weather and climate topic to access the data layer of the average reduction in daytime ambient temperature. But you'll see these icons as well. So you kind of get both of those connections. What topic is the data underneath, and then what are the benefit categories that it links to? And this extent column is going to tell you whether or not it's a national data set or a community data set. And then you do have access to the fact sheet and the metadata. Even though we're having network issues, I'm going to try to load one of these fact sheets just so you can see what that looks like. Let's do temperature reduction since we mentioned that one. These are PDFs, so you can access them and download them and use them on your own. The fact sheets cover things like, why is this topic important? So why did EnviroAtlas include this data layer to begin with? How might you use this information? So we certainly aren't telling you how to use it, but how you might use it in different scenarios. It tells you how, really briefly, how we created the data set, limitations of the data set, and then where you can go for more information. So it looks like it's not going to load the PDF for me, but hopefully you guys are kind of exploring on your own back there, and you can see what the PDFs look like. So we mentioned there is a fact sheet for every data layer. There are a couple of fact sheets that we're still working on, but by and large, you can access a fact sheet for every single data set. So when we think about using EnviroAtlas in different scenarios, there's a reason why one of those uses is heavily education. A lot of educators use EnviroAtlas for a couple of reasons. One, we do provide data that they can use in different contexts, but also we do provide this background information in these fact sheets, so it gives you a really sort of robust background info for that data set. So you don't have to guess why we included it or how you might use it. You get that information directly. Normally, we would go to the mapping application and show you exactly how the map functions. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. See this sad face? We're all sad. I don't think we're going to be able to use the map. But we do encourage you to go look at that, like I said, and ask us questions if you have them. So what we're going to do, actually, first I'm going to ask Annie if she thinks there's other things we should cover. I'll go to the educational materials really quick. If you are interested in those educational materials, I'm going to go quickly to the educational materials webpage. So here's what that looks like, and you can access each module from the educational materials webpage. So it tells you what the lesson plan is. You can access the lesson plan via this button, and we do have overview videos on those lesson plans so you can see how they operate. So if you're interested in lesson plans for different grades, you can access those. This one in particular uses that EcoHealth relationship browser. and has some really fun activities. This lesson plan is for higher grade levels and undergraduate, and sort of follows a case study of, if a community were building a greenway, what data might they need, what data might they consider, and then from given different stakeholder viewpoints, might they be interested in different data sets. So that's the educational materials page. Annie, before we navigate back to the slides, is there anything else you think we should show?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so what we're going to do is go back to the slides, give you a couple more examples of how communities have used the data, and you'll get to see a couple of our data sets that we would have showed you in the mapping application, and then we will take questions from everyone. So we apologize for the abbreviated demonstration. That just means maybe we'll all have to get back together at some point so we can show you that. So one of the data layers that Annie mentioned is this estimated floodplains map, and she mentioned this as well. So one thing that we did was it does incorporate the FEMA flood hazard data, but it also fills in gaps in where FEMA doesn't currently have data. And so one sort of quick analysis that we did was looking at where there might be contaminated sites that might be at risk for inundation. And just with a quick analysis, you can see that there are a number of Superfund national priority areas and brownfield grantee sites that are located in floodplains across the U.S. So if you were interested in that topic, you could use data sets that we provide in EnviroAtlas to sort of explore that more. So this is an example of a real example where there was river flooding in the Mississippi and Missouri River basins, and you can see a tweet and a screenshot from them here in that top left side, and you can see where they were having major issues with flooding. The bottom left right shows you where FEMA has coverage in the black areas and where FEMA doesn't have coverage. And then these right-hand maps show you where EnviroAtlas fills in the gaps in FEMA data. So here we have FEMA coverage, and then you have additional coverage from EnviroAtlas data in these blue areas. So thinking about how you might be able to use our data with existing data sets, we certainly do not replace FEMA data in any way, but where those data aren't available, where they might add value. And so here you see RCRA hazardous waste sites, so large quantity suppliers in orange, and you see yellow Superfund sites as well. And so you can see both Superfund and RCRA sites that are in or very close to floodplains that might be at risk for inundation. Another example of EnviroAtlas data being used, and this is a relatively recent example, it is included on that example use cases page if you want to check it out, was actually here in the city of Durham where we are located. And basically the city of Durham came to us and they said, we need to plant a lot of trees. Can you help us prioritize where we might do this? And we said, sure, we would love to do that for you. So we actually worked with them. It was really great. So what we did was we looked at the Durham neighborhoods and ranked them according to the estimated benefits of planting in trees along street right-of-ways, because that was kind of the areas where they were limited to planting. And we estimated those benefits based on 3 socioeconomic goals that were basically given to us. So improving walkability along sidewalks and neighborhood streets, reducing air pollution from car traffic, and targeting benefits to disadvantaged or vulnerable populations. And so you can see in this left-hand area, these sort of blue outlines are the neighborhoods that ended up getting prioritized, the darker blue ones with more priority, and the lighter bluer ones sort of a step down from that priority level. And then the EnviroAtlas data layer that you see here is the estimated percent of tree cover along walkable roads. So roads that are less than 55 miles per hour in terms of speed limit, so where you have a high amount of tree cover and where you may not have a high amount of tree cover, and you can see these very red areas, which means there's not a lot of tree cover along these roadways, and really help the city of Durham identify where they might be able to plant more trees. And so the outcome from that was that the city of Durham has implemented a 7-year plan to plant 10,000 trees within these neighborhoods. So that was a really sort of interesting outcome. Even if we had not helped the city of Durham, these data were available for use. We do provide, in addition to the environmental data sets and ecosystem services data sets that we provide, we also do provide access to all of the 2010 and 2000 census data, as well as the 2012 to 2016 ACS data. So if any of you are GIS folks and you've tried to download census data, you know it can be a bit of a pain. Our mapping application does provide access to all of those data sets as well. So you can really, do an analysis like this pretty easily on your own, looking at different populations of interest and using data sets like this one, as well as other data sets that we have available that might relate to this topic. Is there anything you want to say about that?
No, that's good.
And I think this might, and so lastly, this is another example that we came across. This is in the city of Chicago, so South Chicago, East Side, and South Deering. They created a guide for equitable development for that area, and this was done by the Calumet River Communities Planning Framework. And this is one of those examples that we sort of came across. The primary data that they were using in their equitable development framework from EnviroAtlas, they were looking at regulated facilities data, so those hazardous waste sites, those Superfund sites, those brownfields. But in reality, some of the topics that they covered within this framework were social equity, economic development, looking at different populations, commute modes, access to green amenities, and any of those topics, EnviroAtlas does provide data that can help communities conduct similar analyses that they did and look at those topics. So even within the examples that you can access on our website, those are examples of the different data sets that were used, but they may not be the limit for what could have been done. So lastly, we'll give you a really quick, a couple of other examples of that we're aware of how people are intending to use EnviroAtlas data. When people download our data, we do ask them if they want to let us know how they intend to use it. And this is just a couple of examples from some states across the U.S. about how they intended to use the data that they were accessing. So things like evaluating wetland services for their state, looking at long-range transportation planning for resiliency, prioritizing watersheds, and thinking about just sort of in general long-term goals for land use decisions and other decision contexts in their communities and states. So, the applications for EnviroAtlas data and tools are pretty wide. We're not always aware of all of them, so that's why we're always glad to hear from folks who end up using EnviroAtlas data or even have questions for us about how they can use the data. So please feel free to be in touch with us. And I think right now we'll take questions from everyone and see if there's other info we can provide. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Anne. That was wonderful, and I really am excited about even using this in some of my research I do at NEHA. This is pretty neat.
Good.
So first question is, how is this different than NEP Assist?
NEPA Assist.
Oh, NEPA Assist, yes.
Yes. So, NEPA Assist and EnviroAtlas contain very different data sets, although there are some overlaps. Like we serve the census data, and I believe so does NEPA Assist, and as well as the regulated facilities. But most of the data do not overlap, and I kind of think of it as they're two different wrappers. They're two different ways of accessing, two different tools for accessing data, and they both have a different target audience, with NEPA Assist being more targeted towards NEPA decisions, and EnviroAtlas being broader, although it can certainly help inform NEPA decisions. That's the National Environmental Policy Act. It's what you have to do when you're planning a large effort. And data that, so when we both tap into the same sources of those data. So for example, the census data, we're both using data from exactly the same source. And if so, as somebody who's using NEPA Assist, I believe can bring EnviroAtlas data layers into the NEPA Assist tool. Likewise, somebody who's using EnviroAtlas can bring data in that's from the NEPA Assist tool. So they're really interoperable, different audiences, different data.
Yeah, and one thing I would say about that is that so NEPA Assist, as Annie mentioned, provides a lot of targeted data for the NEPA process, and some of our data does overlap. So we also do provide impaired waters data, which also NEPA provides. But the EnviroAtlas project itself also does a lot of in-house research. So a lot of the data sets that we provide, we have done research to provide those data sets, whereas NEPA primarily pulls data sets from existing areas within EPA or other existing data. We have actually talked to some NEPA practitioners within EPA about data sets that we have available that they don't currently provide in NEPA Assist that they may find useful. And I forgot to cover a topic that I will actually navigate back and show you guys, which is we have these collections of data that we call featured collections within the EnviroAtlas, where we sort of create it. Because we have 500 data sets, it can be a little difficult to navigate at times. We talked with the NEPA folks about providing a collection of data that would add value to NEPA assessments and that they could readily pull into NEPA Assist or use within EnviroAtlas to sort of access those data sets. So thinking about things like that potential wet restoration, wow, I'm getting tongue-tied over here, potential wetland restoration layer or other data sets that might work for them. So we do talk to them, and there are some interoperable opportunities.
Yeah, and NEPA Assist also has some really cool proximity tools
Yes,
in
I have
it
a buffer
that are
tool.
that are targeted towards the NEPA process that EnviroAtlas does not have.
Yep.
So,
great question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Thank you. And I'd like to remind our participants that you can use the chat box or the Q&A box to type in your question. The next question I have is, what are the differences in utility of EuroAtlas and GeoPlatform? Can the data set available that are on EuroAtlas be used for GeoPlatform?
Great question. I'll let Annie take that.
Great question. So EPA has, and I'm not sure whether the question is targeted towards the federal GeoPlatform, which is for all agencies, or the EPA specific GeoPlatform. So there's multiple ones. EPA has their own GeoPlatform, and actually all of the data that we develop for EnviroAtlas are published on EPA's GeoPlatform, but also the data are harvestable. So the metadata records are harvested by the federal GeoPlatform. So you can also access our data layers through the federal GeoPlatform as well as EPA's GeoPlatform. So yes, you can. You can use any of these data layers in the viewer that's provided by those GeoPlatforms as well.
Yeah, and we mentioned that all of our data are provided as web services. So everything that we provide as web services, you will discover within the GeoPlatform. And unfortunately, you can tell I can't even get to a website here, but I was going to try to show you that our metadata goes straight to EPA's EDG and connects to the GeoPlatform. So if you're familiar with any of those platforms or processes, yes, you can search for EnviroAtlas and find it, or you can use some of our resources as well from our webpage to get directly to either our web services or via the GeoPlatform.
So yes, they're very much linked, and I see there was a clarification, and it was the EPA GeoPlatform
yes.
that the question was related to. So yes, we're really considered to be part of the GeoPlatform.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Great. The next question is, how often is the data updated?
That's a great question, and that's one that we hear quite a bit. And so it depends on whether we're talking about the national data layers or the data layers that we have for the community areas. And so we are trying to keep current with the release of the national land cover data, which has in the past has been released every 5 years. So right now we are in the process of updating many of our metrics to be consistent with the 2016 national land cover data, which were released less than a year ago, maybe 6 months ago. And so when we update the data with the most recent national land cover data, we also use the most current versions of all the other input data that we use. So, like for example, the national hydrography data, or if when there's another census released, we update it with the most current census data. So we're constantly updating data layers as well as adding new ones.
Yes. For those high resolution areas, so those areas where we provide that very high resolution data, so we either develop the 1 meter land cover data that those are based on in-house, or we work with collaborators to develop those data, and those are going to be a snapshot in time. So once we develop that 1 meter land cover and we develop that suite of metrics, about 100 data layers for that populated area, we don't go back and update those data. We do get that question a lot. One reason for that is that it's just really time and resource intensive, and we don't have the resources to go back and update those. For those of you that are interested in downloading the data, I will say when you go to the data download, it will ask you to fill in the form. We're happy for you to fill that in. These spreadsheets, if you open those, and I'm not going to try to tax our network to do it, but if you open those spreadsheets, they will tell you when the last update for each data set was, what the base data, it'll give you a lot of information about those data sets. So if you're interested in specific dates, use those spreadsheets as a way to do that. And obviously each data set has its own metadata as well. So if you are in our mapping application and looking around, you can also access the metadata from the mapping application and learn more about that data set.
Yeah, and we may be revisiting the now I'm getting tongue-tied.
I know.
We may be revisiting whether or not we might redo the community areas in the future. That's still up for debate a little bit.
Yep.
Great. Again, participants, if you have any questions, you could type them in the Q&A box or chat box.
Trying to think of other questions we get commonly.
Yeah, we could mention the joining the email list, and the fact that if there's questions later on, they would be happy to take them from our EnviroAtlas email address.
Yep, great point. So if you want to learn more about EnviroAtlas or learn when we have updates, as we mentioned, we update data sets and add functionality pretty regularly, so it does change. There's a couple things. We do have an email list where we will send out quarterly newsletters about updates on what changes we've made. And also this page that says what's new, there's a good bit of information there about the latest pieces. And also if you think of questions and you want to contact us later, you can use the contact us form from the homepage or any web page within the website. It does come to both Annie and I, and we're happy to field any questions you have after this webinar.
I have another question. You mentioned early on in the discussion climate data that you had climate date layers going back to the 50s to use in modeling in around 150-year periods. You may be answering this now, but will older climate data be added?
Oh, so backcast further than 1950? Probably not, right?
Probably not.
Yeah.
We probably won't go back further than 1950.
Yeah, so just if you're interested in those data, so we do provide all of our data freely available for download with the exception of the climate data. That is because it is so large that we do not provide that. I think we might have ways to do that.
Yeah.
Or we might send you to NASA, honestly, but if you have questions directly about the climate data, feel free to contact us and we can see whether or not we can provide whatever it is you need. And I just pulled up this page to give you the description of those tools that kind of Annie covered during those slides, so you can see sort of exactly the tools that we have built into the mapping application.
And that we didn't mention, but something about the climate, the modeled climate data, is that's been downscaled to 800 meter pixels, which is why it's such a large data set. So it's 150 years worth of data, and that there's a data point for every 800 meter pixel in the US.
We have a few more minutes. Are there any more questions from the participants?
Well, Christine, I'll just say again that we really apologize for the network issues. We really wanted to directly show you the mapping application ourselves, but hopefully everyone has got an idea of the type of information that we provide, and you can certainly get into the dynamic data matrix and search and sort yourselves, or just go straight to the map and look at information. And it looks like we have a question.
Just to put up the contact us slide again.
Oh, yeah. So if you want, so there's a contact us form here on the webpage. You can go click contact us and email us there. Or here are our email addresses, and you can contact us so many ways, or you can email this email address and it comes to us as well. So there's multiple ways that you can contact us. You can use that form on the website, or you can just email us directly. We're happy to respond in any form.
Great. And I have another question. Can individuals use this to see their homes are located in a floodplain?
Yeah, you could. So you could go to the mapping application, use this little, if you see this little tiny search box here, input your address and go to your home, and then you could do a couple things. So one thing is, we don't provide FEMA's flood hazard layer, but you could go to the add data section. Let me go back to the slides. I'll show you really quick. You could use, so here's the data tabs in EnviroAtlas. This is featured collections that I told you about. Here's EnviroAtlas data where you access all of our data. This third tab is the demographic data sets. The fourth tab is time series viewer with the climate data. And this last tab is add data. So you could add FEMA flood hazard to see where the official FEMA flood hazard data layer is. And then you could also access the EnviroAtlas floodplain data layer here to see presence, absence of floodplains.
Yes, and of course our floodplain, this floodplain data that we provide is not, it doesn't have anything to do with flood insurance.
Right. So it would just
really
be for awareness.
From that. Yes, it's for awareness, but it's not, doesn't have anything to do with insurance requirements.
And then I have a question about where the PowerPoints will be posted. So on NEHA's end, I'm going to try to open a Dropbox so I can get the interactive version from Jessica and Anne, and it will be posted within a week on the informatics page. And it will also be posted on EPA's media.
Great.
And Christine, the webinar is being recorded as well, right?
Yes, this is recorded, and the recording, the PowerPoints, your contact information, that all will be posted on our webpage within the week.
Great.
We also just want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And again, sorry that we're having the EPA network issues.
All right, with that, I want to say thank you so much to Jessica and Anne and Bailey for partnering up with NEHA again for this wonderful webinar. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate in reaching out to me. My name is Christine Ortiz-Gamina, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.